Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, May I Call You John? Call me Big Mama. So I was working in a call center as a LVL1 tech support for a big American telecommunication company. I was fairly new when this happened. Call comes in and after the initial spiel I ask, whom do I have the pleasure of speaking with today? John something. Where I live we don't address strangers by their first name, but in the training I was told that it's common in the US, so I followed up, may I call you John? And clearly annoyed voice replied, no. Call me Big Mama, and you can bet your ass I did. Every sentence on the call started with, Sue, Big Mama, let's start with power cycling your modem. Big Mama, could you unplug the power cord? Thank you Big Mama. Big Mama, can you let me know once the broadband light is back on, and so on. He was clearly taken aback as he was not expecting me to follow with his request. The call took a bit longer, maybe about 20 minutes, and for the entirety of it, I could hear his, I presume, girlfriend, wife in the background laughing her ass off. In the end, as the issue was actually resolved, he kinda embraced it, and while saying bye at the end he said, much to my amusement, Big Mama out. I'm not gonna lie, I was young, new at the job, and actually crapping myself that I will get in trouble for this, but apart from few confused looks from my colleagues that could not help to overhear me saying it, nothing bad came of it. I still miss Big Mama, he kinda made my day. Hope this post fits the format of malicious compliance, and thanks for reading. Big Mama out. The next story is titled, You Want a Test Every Day? Fine. Back in 2018 we got a new teacher for our apprenticeship class. The kind of guy nobody really likes. He would constantly brag about his volunteer work, his academic achievements, and in general tried to make you feel stupid every time someone raised their hand. Second or third time we had a class with him, he would ask, how often do we need to test the RCD? For clearance, the RCD is an electrical safety device which in practice doesn't need testing at all, but the rule book states, twice a year, in 99% of all cases. Oh, and by the way, it cuts off the power if you test it. So one student would raise his hand and answer, twice a year, it's even written on the device itself, teacher, wrong, we are in a laboratory environment, therefore it's once every day. Trust me, nobody does this in the real world. 2 days pass and we sit in class with him again. He walks in without saying anything and just starts setting up some kind of experiment. Numerous devices, electrical engines turning, a PC doing some kind of measurement, all the good stuff, but all without explanation. We had no idea what was going on. He simply turned to us like, you should understand everything here, are there any questions left? So naturally I raised my hand, asking, shouldn't you have tested the RCD first, since this is an laboratory environment? With a dead stare he just pushed the test button while his entire setup just went black. You could hear a synchronized click from all the running hard drives stopping. It was magnificent. Thankfully we didn't got graded for his class. The next story is titled, I have to use toilet paper to clean your dirty phone? Okay. This happened right before lockdown when I was helping my mother clean the apartment of my grandmother who had to go to a home for the elderly due to Alzheimer's. It was brought up today because both my mother and I thought it was a funny thing of me to do. My mother and I both have the habit of playing music while we do household chores, and this time was no different. While I was doing the living room, she was cleaning the bathroom with the shower. I suddenly hear her cursing, her phone had fallen on the dirty shower floor. Her slight mysophobia caused her to freak out, so I offered to clean it for her. It was just one side and said it should be clean again in no time with a sheet of kitchen paper and a bit of soapy water. I attempt to move to the kitchen to grab a sheet kitchen paper to clean with but get stopped, just use the toilet paper. I ask her why, as it is the thin kind that basically disintegrates when humidity rises by 1%. She says it is less expensive, but other than that seems to be unable to make a good point. I roll my eyes and engage in my malicious compliance. As my mother watches on, I grab a whopping 4 sheets of toilet paper, fold them a little and let a few drops of water from the sink in the bathroom fall on it. My hand becomes already visible through the 4 sheets because it is that thin. I let a small drop of soap fall on it and start to rub over the surface of my mother's phone. The first whip succeeded in almost tearing the toilet paper in half. Despite that, I continue cleaning her phone. In 3 whippies flat, I was basically just rubbing over the phone with my bare hand, holding whatever scraps of paper I could. While I continue cleaning, I look up at her with the straightest face possible and ask if I was doing it to her satisfaction. At which point she burst out laughing, admitting that I might have a point here and that I was allowed to use kitchen paper for this kind of cleaning in the future. The next story is titled, "Want to Speak to My Manager?" I hope you like rolls. Okay, this happened about 20 years ago, when I was 17, and working in a major UK supermarket, in a rather affluent London suburb. This was my first proper weekend job. I used to work in the bakery section, and it was the best section to work in a supermarket. My job was to make sure that bread and fresh cakes was well stocked, and presented, and test the odd donut, for quality control purposes, so that we can make sure there was fresh items available before we ran out, slicing fresh bread, and making sure rolls were stocked and tongs were available. One busy Saturday, I was doing a quick inventory count, and when I came to the individual rolls, I saw a middle-aged lady, in a large furry coat and luscious red fingernails. I didn't pay much attention to her, until I saw her with a crusty roll in her manicured and bejeweled hand, give it a squeeze, poke her thumb through the crust and threw it back in the basket. She did it again, and when she reached in to try a third one, I piped up, "Excuse me, ma'am, would you mind using the tongs provided, please?" She ignored me, and grabbed a third roll, and broke the crust, so, a little louder, I said, "Ma'am, please use the tongs provided." She heard me that time, and glared at me and said, "I beg your pardon? Ma'am, please don't grab the rolls, please use the tongs in the basket. Are you saying that my hands are dirty?" She then raised her voice while waving her embellished hand at me, wiggling her fingers so they sparkled as they moved. "Are you suggesting that this is filthy?" Well, knowing that folks tend not to wash their hands before using trolleys and baskets, without blinking or thinking, I said, "Yes, they are. Please use the tongs." The inevitable happened. "I want to speak to your manager at once. You should learn to respect your elders and betters. I'll have your job for this insolence." So, I called for the bakery manager to come on down, bearing in mind, this was a busy Saturday. He was in his whites and wanted to know what the problem was. The woman went into a sob story on how she was testing the rolls for freshness, and I was so rude to her, telling her how her hands were filthy, a few crocodile tears here and there, how she had never been so insulted. In a stern voice, my manager turned to me and said, "Did you say this to her?" Now, I was starting to think I did something wrong, and a bit nervous, I replied, "Yes, I asked her to use the tongs." She ignored me, so I asked her again. "Okay." My manager turned to the woman, said that he will be back shortly, he needed to do something and get some paperwork. While my manager was out of earshot, the woman crowed, "See what happens when you don't know your place. I said I could have your job for this." My manager did a quick count of the rolls, muttered 224 loudly and went into the back room. He then emerged with an industrial-sized black bin liner. He then proceeded to empty 8 large baskets of rolls into the bin liner, and a label for 224 individual granary rolls, tied up the bag, handed it to her and said, "Here you are, madam, they're all yours." "I beg your pardon?" "The rolls, madam, they're all yours. You openly admitted to contaminating our stock. You ignored a member of staff when she asked you repeatedly to use the tongs. You've wasted my time. You are paying for the stock you have damaged. Good day. What am I supposed to do with all of these bloody rolls? I only wanted 2. With a dazzling customer service smile, my manager chirped, "Not my concern, madam. Security will escort you to the tills and make sure they are paid for. Enjoy your weekend." He then turned on his heels, and went back upstairs to the bakery. The woman looked at me, then the huge bag, absolutely aghast, so I did the only thing I could do, grab a random loaf of bread, take it to the bread slicer, and laugh in the back room. I saw her almost every week afterwards, always using the tongs. We wouldn't get away with that now, but easily my favorite manager, in all of my years of working. The next story is titled, "Billing Address Ain't the Same as Delivery Address." Some background, the company is very small, 6 or 7 people working at that time, and we are not in the US. With company this small you'd think that it's easy to pass on information to each others, but, well, you'll see. Our head of sales is one of the biggest share owners who's the real boss, used to be a CEO but he demoted himself, and the current CEO is glorified office worker who pretty much just does billing. One thing we do is physical activity games with digital elements for indoor playgrounds and activity parks. My job is to manufacture and send out those games. Typical order process for our company is that our head of sales sends a WhatsApp group message, build AX game for insert client's first name. Any extra information is luxury that I'll have to beg from him or dig up myself if he doesn't care to answer. So order comes for a hockey slapshot game. It's a beefy game where you can shoot hockey pucks at full force to lead lighten up targets. This game weighs a lot because it has to take hits and is like 2 meters wide or so. Not the cheapest thing to send out. Few days go by and the game is ready to be sent out on a big pallet. I'll start my usually process of asking around who actually is the client and where the hell do I send it? I'll go ask my boss, CEO, since she's at next room. I luckily get a billing information. Okay, that's the billing address, but I'll need a delivery address. She doesn't know it and as usual just asks me to figure it out myself. I send a WhatsApp message to head of sales asking where to send the game since he is usually somewhere doing sales and not at office. Haven't seen him in weeks. The answer comes back, I did send all the information to CEO. I do a quick Google search. The address is at other side of the country and it is a beach resort. Not really place for a hockey game, but hey, I don't judge. Also, co-workers have only heard rumors about the client but not any concrete information. With a coworker we are fairly sure that this billing address ain't the right place to send it. We could ask the client, but in the past there has been a cases where the head of sales didn't want us to contact the clients past him, so we comply. This time my coworker sends a WhatsApp group message saying that we only have a billing address for the game. Answer comes back, just send it. Fine. I'll send this extra large pallet to other side of the country if you don't care to double check the information. Head of sales sends a WhatsApp message few days later, crap. The hockey game was sent to a wrong place. It should have gone to city less than 2h drive away. Normally I would have had to start the progress of getting it to the right place, but that was the last time I heard of that particular game. The next story is titled DWP Work Coach Wants More Than Is Necessary from Me to Receive Benefits, I Give Them What They Want. About 10 years ago, I was unemployed because the company I worked for moved its head office and I couldn't move with them. So, I applied for welfare. Keep in mind this was my first time doing this ever, as I had always worked. Part of the agreement is that you detailed what jobs you applied for, when and how, whether it was merely sending a CV or filling out an application form. I did this, but my work coach said this wasn't enough information. I needed to account properly for my days. So, and I admit I was a touch annoyed because I gave them everything that had been asked, I decided to really account for my time. See, you have to write down everything you do and they go through it with you in weekly meetings. Now, I was eager to work, but this was actually taking me away from looking. Anyway, when my next meeting came, I was prepared. I had done exactly what was asked. I accounted for every minute of the days. I started with the exact time I woke up. What time I brushed my teeth and how long. When I pooped and the duration, and even included the score I achieved playing Snake as I shat. I detailed every minute. Obviously, I also included the jobs I applied for too, but even that, I included the entire process. I detailed dinner, including how many chews it took, and piss breaks. The work coach was far from impressed, having had to read all this. You get a 15-minute meeting, but her imposed rules meant she had to read every detail, and that made the meeting an hour long, which put her out for the rest of the day, but I politely informed her that I was doing exactly what she said. At the end of the meeting, she told me, in future just to write down what jobs I had applied for and when I applied for them and what method I used to apply. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. A fortnight later I got a job, so didn't need to go back again, but it felt so wonderful humiliating her like that. I'm sure some people will say she was just doing her job, but she was asking for more than was required. She was doing it to get a sanction target bonus, a job center thing where a work coach has to sanction a certain number of people per week for the flimsiest of reasons, so they had their benefits reduced and the work coach gets a financial bonus. The next story is titled Grounded Because of My Tail, Drove Dad Nuts for 2 weeks. It was the middle 80s in Boise, Idaho. I would have been about 14 and had a very conservative father. My friend's mum was a hairstylist who would do cool trendy stuff for us. Well, the purple rat tail was a bit much for my dad. I was able to hide it for 3 days before he saw it. Immediately grounded until I got rid of it. Fine by me. When he got home from work, I would go sit on the couch next to him. If he got up to go to the bathroom or kitchen, I would follow him. When he would leave, I would follow him with my shoulders slumped, doing a slow wave all the way out to the street. The test of wills took 2 weeks to slowly drive him crazy. Still can't believe he didn't just beat my ass. One morning I got out of the shower and was brushing my teeth when the door opened and he reached in with scissors and chopped my tail off. Then added, "There, now you're not grounded." The next story is titled, "Write Down All of My Downtime." You got it. This happened about a month ago. I work at a plant that make parts for a very known car manufacturer plant. My workplace is very picky about efficiency and your parts per hour. I work on a 3-person line, and on that particular line, we have the 2 people load the parts together and the robots welds them together, resistance weld, and they send it to the person in the middle to load it to be MIG welded by another sets of robots, then inspects the parts, then put them on a rack to be sent to another line. If there is a bad weld, that person has to MIG weld repair the part if possible. Because of the certain sickness, we had to readjust on how we work to keep everyone and self-check ourselves before going to work and have to report any symptoms, and no, they do not check the employee's temperature, only ask them at the door. One day I had a very bad cough that turned into a sore throat and a running nose, so I went to the EHS Environment Health and Safety office to report my symptoms, and since I didn't have any of the other symptoms, I was approved to continue to work but must wear a mask at all time, go figure, and given me a bunch of cough drops. Remember how I said that we have 3 people on my line? Well, we had been struggling with the attendance since we went back to full production, about 80 to 90% attendance, and so we only gotten 2 people on that line until we get more people to show up for work. So we have to do the job for 3 people with just us 2, which is possible but can't run as fast. For reference, with 3 people, we can easily run over 60 parts per hour, but just 2 people, we barely get over 40 parts. Plus I had to blow my nose every 15 to 30 minutes and sucking on cough drops one after another. Eventually the coordinator came to me and asked me about why I wasn't hitting my numbers, and of course I mentioned about the lack of a person and I wasn't feeling well. So then he looked at my downtime paper, where I must write down all of my downtime including breaks and lunch. Then he asked me why I didn't write anything down. I told him that I was very busy with trying to run as much as possible. He was having none of it and demanded that I write down all of my downtime. I was very mad, but I decided to let the malicious compliance kick in. I took the downtime and write down the EHS visit, then continue to fill out the paperwork to include 1 minute of downtime of every time I blow my nose and 1 minute for every time I had to unwrap and insert a cough drops. Also included the time I was stopped and talked to the coordinator and the time it took me to write down my other downtime. By the end of the shift, I filled the entire downtime sheet, and because we have to share the same downtime with the night shift, they had no room to write down anything and they have to turn it into the team leader at the end of the night to be turned into the office where they have to go through them. In the next few days, I was expected to be called into the office or asked about the paperwork, but that never happened, nor was it brought up in any meetings. Nobody said anything about it, but the coordinator was a lot more respectful to me and we get along well, and eventually they were able to hire someone to run our line with us. I know the malicious compliance was petty and very childish, but it felt good and turned out better than I expected. The next story is titled, "Want me to tell you everything?" Okay, ma'am. You know, during pandemic all class are online. So I'm a student and I'm attending class. I was drinking Coke and ma'am noticed and said, "You can't drink that in class and have to ask permission of everything." So what I did, I followed. Every time I unmute myself in between on purpose and ask some crappy stuff like, "Can I unmute myself, ma'am?" Or like, "Can I drink water?" This lasted 3 weeks until teacher gave up. The next story is titled, "So you accuse my daughter of faking my signature?" Hey honey, want to practice falsifying mommy's signature? This happened back in high school when I was in my first year and 12 years old. Our school had this system where, if you had tasks or homework, you needed to write those down on a specific piece of paper, with the date and the score, and a box for the parents to sign. At certain intervals we would get a date by which a parent had to have put their signature in every box, so they could be sure they'd seen all the tests and scores. Now, my mother is one of those people who constantly changes her signature. by which I mean she sometimes signs with just her initials, then her full name, then the initials of her first name, which has two parts, and her full last name, then her full first name but only the first letter of her last name, etc. etc. Basically all the combinations you can possibly think of. Now normally this isn't a problem, but with this paper, you would have all signatures in a row, and it's immediately obvious that the signature is different for almost every single test. And of course, my biology teacher thought I was faking the signatures. I would like to point out that, okay, I wasn't a genius in biology, but I got good grades. I didn't have even one fail on the list that time, can't remember the exact score on every task and test, but I remember finding it strange that she'd think I'd falsified my mother's signature for good grades. She called me to her in front of the entire class and accused me of having faked the signatures. And not in a soft tone of voice either. Everyone could hear what she was accusing me of, and me being a rather shy and terrified first year, that teacher was scary to first years I tell you, kinda stammered that I hadn't falsified anything, but would you know, she didn't believe me. She wrote a note in my planner in which she asked my mum to come and have a chat with her when she was able. Cue me freaking out. I've always been a good student and never had gotten a note in my planner before, and my mum, well, she may only be 4.9 feet, but she can be terrifying if she wants to be. So I went home, knees shaking, palms sweating, and showed the note to my mum. She immediately demanded to see the paper, stared at the signatures for a while, and then apologized to me. She said she'd go talk to my teacher as soon as possible, which she did, but for some reason the woman just didn't want to believe her and thought my mum was an entitled mum whose precious girl could do nothing wrong and that she was protecting me. She urged my mum to make sure to have a signature I couldn't possibly falsify and that if it happened again, I'd get detention. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. You have to know that my own handwriting and my mum's look nothing alike. She has this nice, big handwriting with loops and letters that are attached to each other, while my handwriting is super small, changes from attached letters to loose letters constantly and with barely any loops at all. Of course, if I really wanted to copy her signature I probably could, maybe by tracing over one of hers on another piece of paper, but it would be difficult. So when my mum heard that she had to pick a signature I couldn't possibly falsify, she smirked and said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll make sure you know she didn't copy my signature." From then on, every single time my mum would have to put down her signature for anything regarding schoolwork, as she knew my teacher would probably tell other teachers I'd falsified my mum's signing, she'd make me try and copy it directly underneath it, making me add my name underneath my signature. And underneath that, she would always address the biology teacher and write something along the lines of "Don't worry, as you can see I checked and her signature looks nothing like mine." When some of my classmates caught wind of what my mum was doing, they gleefully started doing the same thing on their tests, trying to copy their parents' signature as bad as possible, signing their names under it again, and adding the name of the biology teacher. In a matter of days, the entire class was doing this. Needless to say, the next week a lot of teachers had noticed this happening and were wondering what was going on, and when our class teacher addressed the issue during class hour, I had a note ready from my mum, whom I had told what was happening and who had written this in advance to give to any teacher who would talk to us about this, and handed it to her. The class teacher read it, started laughing hysterically, and kindly but firmly ordered all of us to stop these shenanigans, as we might actually get in trouble if we continued falsifying our parents' signatures. She also said she'd have a chat with my biology teacher. For the rest of my 2 years in that school, no one bothered me ever again about falsifying my mum's signature, though the biology teacher really didn't like our class after this. My mum still thinks of this incident every now and then and has a good laugh. She still uses 12+ different signatures though. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comments.